Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, my name is John. That year, I had just moved to a small apartment in the city after leaving my hometown. My new life started out quite quietly, with only monotonous office work and long evenings in a cold room. Everything was normal until one night in October, when the clock just struck 12, my old phone suddenly rang. A strange number appeared on the screen. No name, just numbers repeating 6 times in a row. I shivered a little, but still picked up the phone, only to hear a long silence followed by heavy breathing and the sound of someone whispering far away. I said hello softly, but there was no answer, only the whispering sound getting clearer and clearer. Then the call abruptly ended, leaving a cold beep echoing in the dark room. I told myself that maybe someone had dialed the wrong number, but inside I had an indescribable feeling of unease. The following days, the phenomenon repeated itself. Every night at midnight, the phone vibrated with the same strange series of numbers. This time, I decided not to pick up, but the ringing continued. The persistent ringing sound seemed to tear apart the quiet night. I was so haunted that I couldn't sleep, just lying in bed staring at the phone as if it would emit something more terrible. Then I thought of the creepy stories I had heard online about cursed phone numbers, that whoever received a call from them would meet with unimaginable disaster. I forced a smile, trying to reassure myself that it was just a coincidence, that no curse really existed. But deep inside, the fear was still slowly eating away at me. A week later, I decided to share this story with my best friend, Daniel. When I told him, Daniel burst out laughing, thinking that I was working too hard and imagining things. But when I showed him the call log, the strange series of numbers were all clearly visible at the same time frame. Daniel's face suddenly fell. He muttered that he had heard about a haunted phone number, that those who dared to answer would hear the voice of the dead. I shivered, half believing, half doubting, but Daniel advised me to change the number, or at least turn it off at night. I listened, but that night, even though I had removed the phone battery, I still heard the familiar ringing sound echoing in the room. I rushed to the table. The phone was off, but the screen was still dimly lit, displaying that scary series of numbers. Things got weirder and weirder. Every time I picked up the phone, I heard whispers, as if calling my name from afar. Once, I even heard a hoarse female voice clearly saying to answer, or else I would regret it. My body was cold. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. My hands trembled, and I dropped the phone on the floor. From then on, I didn't dare to be alone anymore. Always left the lights on all night, but still couldn't escape the haunting. That strange sound seemed to follow me. Even when I went to work or walked on the street, I still felt like there was a whisper surrounding me. I started to lose sleep. My spirit collapsed, and my mind kept ringing with questions about why I became a victim of this ghostly phone number. One evening, I tried searching for information online. There were many posts about mysterious phone numbers, considered cursed numbers. Some people said that after picking up the phone, they heard crying or a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Some people claimed to have seen a strange figure passing by the mirror when the phone rang. I read with my heart pounding, feeling like each line was referring to me. One of the posts also told of a young man who received a call from a similar number, only to be found dead in a locked apartment a few days later. The cause of death was not clear, but many believed that he was killed by that number. I began to believe that I had been caught in a curse. In the following nights, every time the phone rang, I trembled and did not dare to touch it. However, that silence was even more terrifying, because I knew that if I ignored it, disaster could strike at any moment. Once I dreamed of a dark room in which a phone was placed on the table, ringing continuously. I walked closer and saw the screen showing my name, as if I was calling myself from somewhere else. When I woke up, cold sweat soaked my whole body. I trembled and looked around the empty room, only to see the phone lying still, but the screen still dimly lit. The story did not end there. The next night, when I tried to sleep, the phone rang again. This time, instead of a whisper, I clearly heard a deep, hoarse voice repeating a single sentence. "Answer, John, or you will never escape." I screamed and threw the phone against the wall, but it continued to ring despite the broken case. I felt myself losing control, the line between reality and fantasy becoming more and more blurred. I didn't know if I was living in a nightmare or really falling into the vortex of a curse. That night I lay awake, my mind spinning. I thought about running away from the apartment, leaving the city, but a terrifying thought suddenly flashed through my mind. What if this curse was not attached to the room, but to me? The more I ran, the more it would chase me until it took my soul. That obsession made me suffocate. I didn't know what to do anymore. I just sat in the dark room, staring at the cracked phone that still emitted a ghostly blue light. And then, when the clock pointed to exactly 3 a.m., the screen suddenly showed a line that made my heart stop. It's time to meet into part 1. Please follow the next episode to find out what will happen when John faces that ghostly date. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. The blue light. From the phone screen reflected on the wall, the words that were about to meet seemed to burn brightly in the darkness. My heart was pounding, my throat was tight, my legs felt like they were pinned to the floor. I didn't dare to move closer. I could only stare at the broken but still strangely glowing device. I tried to convince myself that it was all just someone's sick joke, that there were no ghosts. But the fear in my chest screamed that this was no joke. Because how could a broken phone still ring and glow in the middle of the night like this? Shakily picked up the phone, my hands drenched in sweat. As my fingers touched the screen, all the lights in the room flickered repeatedly, then suddenly went out. The room was plunged into darkness. Only the cold blue light from the screen remained. For a split second, I heard a soft laugh behind me. A weak but creepy sound, like the laughter of someone who was no longer alive. I turned around, but saw no one. There was only emptiness and the sound of my own heart echoing in my ears. I shouted as if to dispel the eerie silence, but my voice was immediately swallowed by the heavy air. The screen flickered again, and then a new line appeared. "We will meet where you used to be." I was stunned, searching my mind for memories, but could not understand where that place was. That night, I did not sleep. I sat on the sofa, my eyes glued to the phone screen as if hypnotized. At around 4 a.m., when the sky was still misty, I heard a knock on the door, soft but urgent, regular, as if someone was patiently waiting for me to open the door. I held my breath, not daring to move. The knocking grew louder and louder, then stopped. I trembled, approached the door, and peeked through the small crack. Outside was completely empty. The long hallway was plunged into darkness without a soul. I closed the door tightly, my heart pounding. When I turned around, I almost collapsed because I saw the phone lying in the middle of the room, shining brightly, even though I clearly remembered leaving it on the table. I stepped back, but the familiar ringing sound rang again each time, so piercing that my brain felt like it was about to explode. I had to answer the phone, and this time, that hoarse voice spoke clearly. "John, where you used to go, the old park at 3ME was stunned." The old park, where I used to go a few years ago, had been abandoned after a series of mysterious accidents. People said that there were haunted stories there, ghosts wandering around after unjust deaths. I had never believed in such stories. But now, when the voice from the phone rang, I felt my whole body go cold. I didn't want to go, but I was afraid that if I resisted, something terrible would happen. That whole night, I just huddled in my room, waiting for morning. The next day, I found Daniel and told him everything. His face turned pale when he heard it. Daniel said that the park was once the site of a tragic traffic accident that left many people burned to death in a bus. Since then, the area has been abandoned, and many people rumored that every midnight you could hear crying and phone calls. My blood froze when I heard it. Daniel advised me not to go there at all, that if I went, I would never return. But the haunting in my head kept urging me, as if an invisible hand was pulling me closer to that place. The next night, I tried to turn off my phone, even removing the battery. But at exactly 3 a.m., the ringing rang again. This time, it wasn't just from the phone, but also from all four sides of the room. The terrifying sound was all around, making me scream like crazy. I was so pressured that I picked up the phone and shouted, "What do you want?" The voice chuckled, then whispered, "Meet me at the park. If not, I will come to you first." I dropped the phone, my whole body trembling. Those creepy words were like a knife stabbing deep into my mind, making me understand that the choice was no longer mine. Asterisk, the next day, I decided to go to the park to end this nightmare. As the sun set, I put on my coat, stuffed my phone in my pocket, and drove away. The road leading to the park was dark and quiet, with only the streetlights flickering faintly. The night wind blew coldly, carrying the smell of damp earth and an indescribable gloom. When my car stopped in front of the rusty park gate, the phone screen suddenly lit up, displaying the words, "Welcome." I was sweating, my hands trembling as I opened the door and walked in. The space inside was deathly silent, each tall tree casting long shadows like hands reaching out to hold on. The chirping of insects mixed with the whistling of the wind through the rusty swings created a creepy melody. I walked slowly, my heart pounding. Then the phone rang again. I picked it up. This time the female voice rang right next to my ear. "You're here, get ready, I'm standing behind you." I turned around in shock, but saw no one. Only the swing swayed gently in the darkness. I shouted loudly, but the sound echoed, far away, then stopped. The phone screen showed a new sentence that almost made me collapse. "The game has just begun of part 2. Please follow the next episode to discover what awaits John in the deserted park at midnight." Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I stood frozen, in the middle of the deserted park, my hand clutching the phone that was still glowing with a ghostly green light. The message on the game screen had just begun to make my blood freeze. I looked around. The darkness was all around. The rows of Old trees rustling in the wind as if whispering creepy secrets. The rusty swing was still swinging, each creaking sound like the sigh of someone invisible. I tried to calm down, telling myself this was just a trick, but deep down, I knew I was being dragged into a real nightmare, one of those true scary stories that people still tell each other. Suddenly, the phone vibrated violently. The screen showed a blurry map, a red dot flashing in the center of the park. I trembled, but my feet seemed to be hypnotized, forced to follow the arrow with each step. The air around me became heavier. The musty, cold smell spread, making me nauseous. Approaching the abandoned children's playground, I heard a childish laughter echoing, clear but unusually long, as if coming from underground. I gritted my teeth and continued walking, my heart pounding. In the middle of the yard, a merry-go-round rocked slightly, even though no one had touched it. I walked closer, the phone rang again, and a hoarse female voice said, "Hello John, are you ready?" I panicked, shouting, "Who are you? Why are you following me?" Only a soft laugh answered, then the line went dead. The screen showed the next line, "Find the bench where the last person sat." I swallowed, looking towards the row of rotten benches next to the black lake. Cold air blew from the lake's surface. A fishy smell rushed straight to my nose. As I approached, I suddenly saw a figure appear on the bench, faint as smoke, then disappeared as soon as I blinked. I shivered, stepped back, but the phone vibrated violently. The red words appeared, "Sit down." I clenched my teeth, reluctantly, sat down on the cold chair. The rotten wood seemed to crumble under the weight of my body. Immediately, I felt a cold air seep into the back of my neck, and clearly heard a whisper right next to my ear. This place used to be his last stop. I turned around, but saw only a cold void. No one standing there. The thick atmosphere seemed to suffocate my chest. The phone lit up again, this time showing the image of a young man, his face burned, his eyes wide open in horror. The image shook, and then disappeared, leaving the words, "He has paid the price. You will be next if you do not complete the game." My limbs went limp. I tried to breathe, but my breath was intermittent. I shouted into the void, "I do not play, spare me." The sound of the wind whistling past my ears was like a sarcastic reply. Suddenly, in the distance, the broken lampposts in the park turned on and off at the same time, creating a strange flashing rhythm leading to the abandoned restroom. The phone immediately displayed a notification. "The next step is waiting for you." I wanted to run away, but my legs felt like they were pinned to the ground, forcing me to drag each heavy step towards that place. When the rusty door of the old restroom creaked open, a strong stench rose up. I covered my nose, my hands trembling as I held the phone as the only source of light. It was dark inside. The walls were peeling like human skin. The cracks were zigzagging like distorted faces. I shined the light around, then jumped when I saw scribbled lines written on the wall in a thick black substance. They formed a message. "I am always watching you." My heart almost stopped. My throat was dry. At that moment, the phone vibrated violently, and the female voice rang out again. "John, this place has witnessed many screaming souls. Can you hear it?" I listened, and sure enough, from within the rotten walls came a wailing, a long wail, like dozens of people desperately calling for help. Pi rushed out in a panic, took a deep breath, but before I could calm down, the phone rang again. The screen showed new instructions. "Go to the central roundabout," where the end was also the beginning. I looked up. The old roundabout appeared under the dim moonlight, the rusty steel reflecting a pale blue light. I walked tremblingly, each step echoing in the dead space. When I got there, the roundabout suddenly moved, slowly rotating as if someone was playing. I stood there like a stone, cold sweat running down my forehead. Suddenly, a white figure sat there, head bowed, hair falling down to cover my face. I screamed in despair, but the figure slowly raised its head, revealing a scorched face, lifeless white eyes. The phone vibrated, a female voice whispered, "Now, you have seen it." My whole body trembled. I wanted to run away, but my legs couldn't move. The scene before my eyes seemed to drag me into the abyss of horror. In a split second, the spin stopped. The white shadow disappeared, leaving only a terrifying silence. I collapsed to the ground, holding my head, gasping for breath. But the phone screen showed a new line. "The game is not over. Prepare for the next level." I choked, feeling like I was being pushed into a maze with no way out. The darkness around me became thicker and thicker, as if it wanted to swallow all life. End of part 3. Please follow the next episode to see where the ghost game will take John and what horrors await him ahead. Hello, everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. I collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily, my whole body drenched in cold sweat. Before my eyes, the Ferris wheel had stopped. The white shadow had disappeared as if it had never existed. But the phone in my hand was still glowing brightly. The words on the screen made my heart stop beating. "You have seen the beginning, now face the end." I screamed in despair. The scream echoed in the vast space of the abandoned park, then was quickly swallowed by the darkness. I felt like I had become a puppet, being controlled, no longer having the right to choose. And everything around me was now part of the terrifying haunted stories that I never wanted to believe. Suddenly, the phone vibrated. This time, there was no more hoarse laughter, but instead a sob. A young female voice rang out, weak, trembling. "Please help me." I was stunned, my heart choked, my throat dry. I stammered, "Who are you?" But the voice only repeated the words, "Please help me," a few more times before fading away, leaving only static in the speaker. I looked at the screen. A new line appeared. "If you want to escape, follow the crying." Immediately, I heard a small sob from deep in the park, sometimes far, sometimes near, as if coming from underground. I trembled, but my feet still followed. Automatically, the crying led me to an abandoned greenhouse, the door broken, the rusty iron frame extending like claws. Inside was dark, only a few pieces of glass, glittering, reflecting the blue light from the phone screen. The air was thick with the smell of mold and ash. I stepped in. The crying suddenly stopped, replaced by whispers echoing everywhere. I spun around, trying to find the source of the sound, but could only see my own shadow flickering in the broken glass. Then one of them reflected not me, but the silhouette of a long-haired girl, her face burned, her eyes lifeless. I screamed, raised my hand and hit the glass. It shattered into hundreds of pieces, and the figure disappeared. At that moment, the phone rang again. A trembling female voice said, "I'm trapped. Don't let him find me." Then the line was cut off. The cold beep continued. I trembled and stepped back. But the blue light on the screen shone on the glass floor, showing the words, "Dig down where you stand." My limbs went limp. I looked down at the ground. saw the cracks crisscrossing as if hiding something underneath. I shouted in panic that I didn't want to continue, but the sound of the wind whistling through the broken glass window was like a cruel urging. I knelt down, using my hands to dig the cold, hard soil. My fingernails were scratched, blood oozed out, but then I touched something hard. Pulling it up, I saw another phone, old and scorched. The screen was cracked, but strangely, it also lit up, showing the words, "You are now connected." I threw it down in panic, but both phones rang at the same time, creating a deafening sound that pierced straight into my brain. I screamed, covering my ears, and collapsed onto the cold ground. In the chaos, a figure appeared in the middle of the greenhouse. It was the long-haired girl I had just seen in the mirror, limping, her clothes torn and scorched. She stepped forward, her charred hand outstretched, her eyes pleading but empty. I stepped back, both scared and confused. She opened her mouth, her voice weak. "Help me escape from him." Before I could ask, a hoarse laugh echoed through the space, shattering the remaining glass. The familiar, hoarse voice from the phone rang out in unison. "Don't listen to it. It already belongs to me." I held my head, feeling as if my brain was being torn apart by two opposing streams of sound, one pleading for help, the other giving a threatening command. I screamed in despair, but both voices grew louder and louder. Then the light in the greenhouse suddenly went out, leaving only the two phone screens glowing, projecting the distorted silhouettes of me and the girl. I realized that I was standing between a choice: save the girl's soul, or listen to that voice to preserve my life. I trembled, not knowing what was real and what was fake. But then, deep inside, I felt an invisible hand grip my heart, causing my breathing to stop. I understood that if I didn't choose, I would die right there. I trembled as I walked towards the girl, but when my hand was about to touch her, all the lights suddenly went out, leaving a thick darkness. In that darkness, a hoarse voice rang right next to my ear: "The game is about to move to the next phase, and you have no way back." I shouted loudly, but my voice seemed to disappear into nothingness. The phone in my pocket rang again, the screen lit up with the words, "Leave this place before sunrise, otherwise you will stay forever." I rushed out of the greenhouse in a panic, running frantically through the abandoned park. Every step felt like dozens of invisible eyes were watching me. When I got out, I collapsed to the ground, my heart pounding, my eyes blurred with exhaustion. But the phone kept ringing, as if reminding me that the game had not stopped. End of part 4. Please follow the next episode to see what horrors John will face when the game enters a new phase. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. I collapsed right outside the park gate, my body exhausted, my chest feeling as if it was being squeezed so hard that I couldn't breathe. My breathing was ragged, my eyes were dizzy. I tried to take in some of the cold night air, but even after I escaped that rusty gate, the phone in my pocket continued to vibrate. The piercing sound echoed as if it was trying to pierce my skull. I pulled it out with trembling hands, the screen glowing with the words that made me despair. "The next phase has begun." I threw it to the ground, kicked it hard, but the phone remained unharmed, continuing to ring loudly. I screamed in vain, but only the cold wind answered. I trudged back to my apartment. Each breath was heavy. When I entered the room, I locked the door tightly, gasping for breath and trying to reassure myself that it was all just a nightmare. However, the phone kept ringing, echoing throughout the dark apartment. I tried to ignore it, but the incessant ringing wouldn't let me rest. I picked it up, the familiar growl echoing in my head. A deep voice rang out. "John, you have entered the game. There is no escape. The new phase has begun, and I will always be watching." I trembled and asked who he was. He chuckled softly, the sound mixed with electronic noise that made my skin crawl. Then a weak female voice rang out intermittently, as if from afar. "Don't listen to him. Save me." The line suddenly cut off, leaving a deadly silence. I couldn't sleep all night. The light from the phone screen was reflected on the ceiling, making my shadow sway as if someone was lurking. I began to hear strange noises in the apartment. Footsteps moving from room to room, soft knocking on the window, whispering in my ears. I rushed to turn on all the lights, but the bulbs flickered repeatedly and then went out, leaving the room in complete darkness. When the only light left was the phone, I knew I was completely trapped in this game. The next morning, I went to find Daniel. His face paled as I recounted the night of terror. Daniel told me I had to find out the root of that number. Rumor had it that it belonged to someone who had died unjustly in a bus fire years ago, and whose spirit could not be released, haunting his last phone number. Anyone who received the call would be drawn into the game until the spirit was freed, or a new victim died in his place. My blood ran cold as I listened, but I also had a faint hope that the nightmare could end if I found the truth. Daniel warned me that many people had tried to investigate, but no one had returned. At night, I decided to try again. I sat in my room, placed the phone in front of me, and waited. At exactly 12 o'clock, the screen lit up and red text appeared. Phase 2 begins in your own home. My heart skipped a beat, my eyes darting around the small apartment. The bedroom door opened slightly, the hinges creaking like an invitation. I trembled as I approached, holding the phone as my last protection. As I entered, I saw black, wet handprints on the wall, sliding down to the floor. I stepped back, but the phone rang, a female voice whispering, "Find where he hid me." I stammered, "Where?" But the voice only let out sobs. The phone displayed a new line. "There is a door in the apartment that you have never opened." I was startled, immediately remembering the small cellar behind the kitchen, a place I had never noticed. The cellar door was old, covered in thick dust. I trembled as I pulled. The latch, the musty smell rushed straight to my nose. Inside was dark, the wooden stairs leading down deep. I held the phone as a light, each heavy step echoing in the stuffy space. At the end, I saw a small, cold room with mottled walls. In the middle of the room was a wooden chair. On the chair was another phone, scorched, identical to the one I found in the greenhouse. The screen also lit up, showing the words, "Welcome to the next stage." Before I could react, the darkness in the basement moved. I heard a dragging sound, a gasp behind me. Turning around, I only had time to catch a glimpse of a tall black figure, eyes burning like embers, then disappeared into the distance. I screamed, but the sound was swallowed. The phone on the chair rang loudly, a familiar, deep and hoarse voice. Now the game had just begun for real. I shivered, feeling like the room was closing in, the wall was getting closer. I rushed up the stairs, but the phone in my hand lit up again. The red words clearly displayed, "Run. But he will always be behind you." Rushed out of the basement, slamming the door, my heart pounding as if it was about to burst. But the horror was not over yet. Both phones in my pocket rang at the same time. A hoarse male voice and a female voice calling for help rang out at the same time, forming a ghostly chorus that pierced my ears. I collapsed to the floor, holding my head, feeling like I was going crazy. At that moment, a new line appeared on the screen that made me choke. The next phase will begin as soon as you close your eyes to sleep. End of part 5. Please follow the next episode to see what terrible things will happen to John when he is forced to sleep and falls into a nightmare spiral. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. That night, I sat in the living room, eyes wide open, trying not to let sleep overtake me. But the human body cannot resist nature forever. After hours of struggling, my eyelids became heavy, my head drooped. I jerked awake, trying to calm myself, but the clock struck 2 in the morning, and the phone in my hand lit up again. The words appeared like a cold warning. The next phase will begin as soon as you fall asleep. I held my head tightly, my heart pounding. I didn't want to, but fatigue gradually overwhelmed my will. And then, despite my fear, I fell asleep without realizing it. In my dream, I saw myself standing in the middle of a dark room. There were no doors, no windows, just for grey, mottled walls. I still held the phone in my hand, the screen emitting a blue light. I tried calling, but there was no signal, only a long static. Then suddenly, a hoarse voice rang out. "You're finally here." I shivered, looked around, but the room was empty. A cold air rushed through, and on the wall appeared black handprints, as if dozens of people were trying to crawl out from inside. I panicked and ran in the opposite direction, but my feet felt like they were stuck in mud. The more I struggled, the more I was sucked in. The phone rang. A weak female voice rang out. "John, don't sleep. Get out now," I shouted. "How can I get out?" But the only response I got was a long sob. At that moment, a pitch-black door opened at the end of the room. I had no choice but to step through. As soon as I stepped in, the scene changed. I found myself in the abandoned park from before, but this time, everything was distorted, twisted, as if space had been bent by an invisible force. The swings spun violently, the trees swayed despite the wind, and from all sides, children's laughter echoed in a ghostly way. I ran as fast as I could, the phone in my hand vibrating continuously. The screen showed the words, "You can only escape if you find out who the last caller was." I stopped, gasping for breath, my mind reeling. Who was the last caller, and what did he want? Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning around, I saw a tall, dark figure, face unclear, only his eyes burning red. He walked slowly but surely, each step echoing like a hammer hitting my heart. I screamed and ran, but the park in my dreams seemed endless, running forever without reaching an end. The dark figure still followed, the distance unchanged. In the midst of my despair, I saw an old telephone booth in the distance, standing alone in the middle of an abandoned square. The light inside flickered continuously. I rushed over, opened the door, went in, and locked it tightly. The phone in the room suddenly rang loudly. I picked up the receiver with trembling hands, pressing my ear close. A familiar female voice rang out, but this time it was no longer weak, but full of urgency. "John, you have to wake up now. Otherwise he will trap you here forever. I screamed in panic. How can I wake up? The voice replied, find the first call. That is the key. Then the line cut off, leaving behind a loud knocking sound outside the phone booth. I turned around, saw a dark figure standing right next to me. A burning hand placed on the glass, making the entire phone booth shake. I closed my eyes tightly, screaming in despair, praying to wake up. When I opened my eyes, I found myself lying on the bed, panting, cold sweat soaking my shirt. I thought I had escaped, but I was wrong. The phone on the bedside table rang loudly, the screen lit up with bright red text. Welcome back, the new phase has just begun. I threw it on the ground, holding my head and screaming, but the sound echoed throughout the room, making me realize that I had not really woken up. I was still stuck in the nightmare vortex, unable to distinguish between reality and dream. The darkness in the room gradually spread, swallowing everything. From the corner of the room, a deep, hoarse voice spoke, clearer than ever. John, you will never escape, whether awake or dreaming. I trembled, retreating towards the wall, my eyes glued to the phone vibrating on the floor. Then a female voice rang out, desperate and pleading. Save me, end this game. I screamed and asked how, but there was no answer. The phone screen only showed a single line of text. The truth lies right where you started, of part 6. Please follow the next episode to see what John will do when he is led back to the origin of everything. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I sat down on the floor, holding my head tightly, breathing heavily. The words on the phone screen were still glowing brightly. The truth was right where you started. I tried to think, my mind was spinning. The starting place was at this apartment, where I received the first call, or the abandoned park, where the game began to take me further. I looked around the familiar room, but now cold as a tomb. The lights flickered a few times and then went out, leaving behind the eerie blue light from the phone. The creepy feeling seeped into every vein, making my skin crawl. I knew I had to go back to the first place the phone rang in the middle of the night, the small bedroom in this very apartment. I walked into the room, each step heavy, the wooden floor creaking under my feet like a whale. The room was dark. The bed where I had sat to receive the first call was still there. I sat down, placing the phone on my knees. As I feared, it rang again, the shrill sound tearing the silence apart. I picked up the phone with a trembling voice. The familiar hoarse voice immediately rang out. You have returned, but do you dare to face the truth? I was silent, unable to speak. The voice continued, this time interspersed with a soft laugh. It all started here, where you live with a ghost without knowing. E.T. was startled, turning around. In the mirror hanging on the wall, I was not alone in my reflection. Behind me, a blurry figure, long hair falling down, a burned face, white eyes. I turned around, but behind me was only emptiness. I screamed, my heart pounding. The mirror reflected again, and this time the figure was standing right next to me, lips moving, whispering something I could not hear clearly. The phone vibrated, the screen lit up with the words, "You are living with a trapped soul." I threw the phone on the floor in panic, but it kept ringing. I ran outside, but the door wouldn't open, as if locked from the outside. I was trapped in my own apartment, I knocked on the door, shouting for Daniel, but to no avail. The knocking came from inside the room, right behind me. I turned around and saw the wardrobe shaking slightly, as if someone was trying to open the door from the inside. I backed away, my heart almost jumping out of my chest. The wardrobe burst open, a cold breath of air blew out, and from the darkness, a scorched hand reached out, scratching at the floor. I screamed, falling backwards, but the phone vibrated violently. A weak female voice rang out, "Help me, he's been locking me here for a long time." I shivered, feeling my blood run cold. I approached the wardrobe, but a hoarse male voice immediately interrupted, growling, "If you open it, you'll die with it." I stood between the two streams of sound, my head spinning, my heart about to burst. Cold sweat ran down my face. I trembled as I reached out to touch the door of the closet. At that moment, the light in the room suddenly turned on and then off. The whole room was plunged into darkness. I heard footsteps slowly approaching from inside the closet, each step like a hammer hitting my heart. I trembled, pulled my hand back, and slowly retreated. The phone lit up again. This time the screen displayed two overlapping lines of text. "Save me or leave everything." I screamed, not knowing which to choose. While I was panicking, a cold wind blew. The wall mirror shook violently. A horrifying scene appeared on the mirror. I saw myself standing in front of this very apartment, but from the outside and inside. The window, there was another figure. The face was exactly like mine, but the eyes were pitch black, without light. I was stunned, understanding that there was something that had lived with me in this apartment from the beginning. The hoarse voice rang out again, this time not only through the phone, but throughout the room. "You are the replacement, and this soul will never leave you." I held my head, screaming madly, but the sound echoed everywhere, making me want to go crazy as suddenly. The closet door opened completely, and from inside, a white figure rushed out. It was the girl with long, scorched hair. She fell to her knees, sobbing, her voice trembling. "Please free me." Right behind her, a tall black figure stepped out, eyes glowing red, face distorted. He placed his charred hand on the girl's shoulder, pulling her into the darkness. I screamed loudly, rushing to hold her back, but the invisible pulling force was so strong that it almost tore my arm off. The phone on the floor lit up, displaying the words, "The game can only end with sacrifice." I trembled, realizing that I would have to make a final choice. End of part 7. Please follow the next episode to see what choice John will have to make when facing the horrifying truth right in his own apartment. Hello, everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, the room shook violently as the phone on the floor emitted a blinding red light. The words on the screen seemed to be engraved in blood. A game that could only end with sacrifice. I trembled, my heart pounding, my eyes glued to the scene before me. The long-haired girl was on her knees, her trembling hands reaching out to me, her voice sobbing, begging to save me. Behind her, a giant black shadow, twice as tall as a normal person, eyes glowing like hot coals, charred hands gripping her shoulders like iron chains. He looked at me, a crooked smile revealing broken teeth, his deep voice echoing throughout the room. "John, you must choose." I choked, my whole body trembling. The air was thick with the smell of ashes and rusty blood, making me want to vomit. The phone vibrated again. A new line appeared, "Save her soul or accept death instead." I backed away to the wall, my mind spinning. If I save her, I could be dragged into darkness forever. If I choose myself, I will be guilty of abandoning this soul that is crying for help. The room is getting colder and colder. My breath turns into white smoke. I scream and ask why I am dragged into this. A hoarse laugh replies, "You are the one who heard the first call, the one who dared to enter our vortex. Once it starts, there will never be a way out unless a soul is sacrificed." The girl raises her scorched face, her empty eyes brimming with thick black tears. Her voice trembles. "John, stop it. Don't let him continue." I grit my teeth, tears welling up. My trembling hand reaches out to her. But as soon as my fingers touch hers, a cold electric current shoots through my entire body. The image before my eyes changes. I see the scene of the bus accident years ago. The fire is raging, the screams of people echo. The girl is trapped in the fire. The phone in her hand falls. The screen lights up with that terrifying series of numbers. I screamed, trying to rush in to save, but the image suddenly disappeared, leaving darkness and sobbing. The phone on the floor continued to flash, this time displaying the words "Sacrifice yourself to free your soul or become a part of the game." Forever, I collapsed, my mind spinning. The tall black figure stepped closer, each heavy step shaking the whole room. He pointed his hand straight at me, growling in his voice, "You will replace me to guard this place if you refuse." I trembled, retreating slowly, but behind me was the cold wall. The girl cried miserably, shouting, "Choose." I closed my eyes tightly. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Memories flooded back, sleepless nights, midnight calls, and creepy breathing sounds. I understood that if I didn't end it, this game would continue to drag others like me into a vortex of horror. I shouted loudly, "I agree to save you." In that moment, the red light flared up, the darkness roared fiercely, the burning eyes gradually extinguished. He retreated, his body disintegrated into black smoke, leaving the girl collapsed in my arms. But when I thought everything was over, the phone on the floor lit up again with the words "Unfinished sacrifice." I was shocked, let go of the girl. My eyes widened as I stared at the continuously flashing words. The girl looked up, her empty eyes gradually regaining some light. Her voice softly said, "John, let me go." I shook my head in panic, but she smiled sadly, her eyes distant. The phone vibrated violently. The hoarse male voice echoed again, "You have chosen, but the price has not been paid yet. If you want to be freed, a soul must leave this world." I understood that the girl herself must be the final sacrifice. I screamed in despair, but her hand gradually faded. Her body dissipated into the air like smoke. The room shook. The red light suddenly went out, leaving only darkness. I collapsed to the floor, tears mixed with cold sweat, my heart filled with fear and pain. But the phone rang again, this time a gentle female voice, light as a breeze, thanking him. Then it was silent. I thought it was all over, but the phone screen lit up again, displaying a breathless line of text that the game wasn't over. It had just changed to another form. End of part 8. Please follow the next episode to see what John will face when he thinks he has won but falls deeper into the deadly game. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. I sat down on the floor, holding my head in my hands. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. Tears were still wet on my cheeks, but before my eyes, the phone screen was shining brightly. The cold red words appeared that the game was not over. It had just changed to another form. I was breathless. My whole body was trembling. I shouted loudly that I had done everything. Why wasn't it over yet? But the only thing that answered me was a long static and a hoarse laugh that echoed as if it came from deep underground. The space of the apartment seemed to distort. The walls trembled. The zigzag cracks were like faces screaming in silence. I realized that the girl's sacrifice had only broken one layer of the curse, and the deeper layer was still waiting for me. The phone vibrated so hard that I thought it was going to explode. The new words appeared. Be prepared. The next stage is fusion. I was stunned, not understanding what fusion meant, but my heart told me that it was something more terrible than anything I had ever experienced. The air in the room was thick. The smell of ashes gradually disappeared, replaced by the pungent smell of rusty iron and fresh blood. Cold sweat trickled down my neck. I trembled as I approached the phone, but as soon as I touched it, a cold air penetrated my whole body, making my heart stop beating in an instant. I saw a distorted scene before my eyes. I was standing in an endless hallway, the lights flickering intermittently. On both sides were countless identical doors. Each door had numbers engraved on it, and all were familiar numbers that had haunted me for many nights. From within the doors came the sounds of crying, laughing, and screaming like hundreds of trapped souls. I ran in panic, but each step only brought me closer to a door. The phone in my hand lit up, displaying the message to choose a door to merge. I shook my head, not wanting to open it, but the invisible hand forced me to reach out. I placed my hand on the nearest door, and for a moment, the screams inside were so loud that my ears felt like they were about to burst. The door swung open, and darkness swallowed me. I fell into an endless void, my ears ringing from the chaotic screams. When I opened my eyes, I found myself in another room, familiar yet strange. It was the living room of my apartment, but everything was distorted like in a nightmare. The walls were mottled, the sofa was scorched, the window frames were pitch black. In the middle of the room was a large mirror, and in the mirror I saw my image, but my eyes were completely black. My mouth was smiling a distorted smile. The person in the mirror spoke in a familiar hoarse voice. Now we will merge. I backed away, screaming in panic, but the image in the mirror reached out. The hand penetrated the cold glass and grabbed my wrist. I struggled, but the pulling force was too strong. My body was slowly being pulled into the mirror. Hundreds of voices, whispers, cries, and crazy laughter echoed in my head. I understood that the souls trapped in this game were trying to merge with me. The phone in my hand vibrated. The screen displayed the words, "You will be the new door." I panicked and shouted, "No, please spare me." But the black eyes in the mirror just stared at me, a crooked smile spreading from ear to ear. For a moment, I felt like a part of myself was being pulled into him, and vice versa. He was creeping into my mind. When I jerked out, the whole room was dark. The mirror disappeared, but the strange feeling was still in my head. The hoarse voice now echoed in my mind, without the need for a phone, whispering each word, "John, we are one." I trembled, holding my head, trying to dispel that voice, but to no avail. The phone lit up again, displaying a new message. "You have one last chance to break the game. Go to the place where death began." I froze, immediately remembering the bus accident years ago, where it all began. My heart pounded. I knew that my last trip was waiting for me there. I raised my head, looked around the desolate apartment, my eyes stinging with fear and exhaustion. But deep down, I knew that there was no other choice. The game had trapped me, and if I didn't leave, I would become a part of it forever. I clenched my phone in my hand, took a deep breath, and prepared to leave. End of part 9. Please follow the next episode to see what horrors await John at the site of the fateful bus accident years ago. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I sat in the ruined apartment. The phone in my hand vibrated continuously. The screen lit up with the words, "Find the place where death begins." My heart was pounding, partly wanting to run away, partly knowing that there was no way back. I stood up, trembling, put on my coat, and walked outside. The night was cold. The wind howled as if it wanted to tear my skin apart. The road leading to the scene of the accident years ago was quiet. Only the weak streetlights flickered, shining on the patchy cracks on the asphalt. I drove, but my hands were shaking, my eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Every step I took, I felt invisible. Eyes watching me from both sides of the forest. When I arrived, I stopped the car on the side of the road. Before my eyes was an empty lot, where the bus had burned fiercely years ago, taking the lives of dozens of people. Even though many years had passed, this place was still abandoned, overgrown with weeds. The ground was covered with black burn, marks that had never faded. I shakily stepped down, holding the phone tightly in my hand. Immediately, the screen lit up with the words, "Welcome to the starting point." The air was heavy. The smell of ash still lingered. The wind blew, carrying a faint murmur as if someone was crying. I walked step by step towards the ground, my heart pounding like a drum. Suddenly, a roar rang out, and from the darkness appeared the distorted shape of a burned bus. It appeared like an illusion, but it was so clear that I could smell the acrid smell of smoke. Each window was broken. From inside came screams, the sound of knocking on the door for help. I was stunned, my legs trembling, unable to move forward or back. The phone in my hand vibrated. A weak female voice rang out, "Please help them. Don't let them be stuck forever." But then, the familiar hoarse voice interrupted, "No one can be freed unless you replace them." I shouted loudly to be quiet, but both voices still echoed, tearing at my mind. The door of the scorched bus opened. Black smoke poured out. From inside, figures stepped down, charred figures, eyes white, mouths moving, soundless words. They surrounded me, lifeless eyes staring, as if wanting to swallow my soul. I stepped back, but behind me was a dark void. A charred hand grabbed my shoulder. I shouted loudly, turned around and saw the long-haired girl. She whispered, "John, this is where I died. Please free us all." I trembled, tears welled up, not knowing what to do. The phone lit up, showing the words, "Offer to open the way." I shook my head. My heart felt like it was exploding. I screamed, I couldn't. But then, before my eyes, the scorched faces continued to scream, their eyes filled with despair. That horrible scene made me realize that this curse not only bound me, but also dozens of innocent souls. If I did nothing, all of them would be trapped in the haunting vortex forever. I trembled and knelt down, clutching the phone, shouting, "Tell me what to do." A hoarse voice replied, sacrifice yourself." A female voice interrupted. "Break the phone, that's the key." I was confused, my mind spinning, not knowing who to believe. On one side was my death, on the other was a fragile hope. I took a deep breath, clutching the phone tightly. It vibrated violently, the red light flashing, as if in protest. I gathered all my strength and threw it hard onto the scorched ground. A crackling sound rang out, the screen cracked. At that moment, the surrounding space shook. The phantom bus roared one last time, then turned into ashes. The charred figures slowly faded, their lifeless eyes gradually returned to peace. The sobbing turned into whispers of thanks echoing in the wind. I collapsed, tears mixed with cold. Sweat, my heart pounding. I thought I had freed everyone. But at that moment, the phone on the ground lit up again. The cracked screen, still showing the last line of the game, "Not over. You just reached the last door." I was stunned, my eyes wide open in despair. From the darkness, slow footsteps sounded, familiar, heavy, and a deep, hoarse voice whispered right behind John. This was the real ending. End of part 10. Please follow the next episode to see what happens when John faces the horrifying end of the deadly game. Hello everyone. Before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe, and leave a comment saying where you're from and when you watched. That way, YouTube will continue to show you stories like this. Now, let's get started. Asterisk, I stood still. On the scorched ground, my breath caught in my chest. In front of me, the cracked phone screen was still glowing. The blood-red letters flashing continuously. The game had not stopped. You had just reached the last door. Behind me, heavy footsteps rang out regularly. Each step seemed to hit my heart. I did not dare to turn around, but my long shadow on the trembling ground proved that something huge was approaching. A familiar hoarse voice rang out right behind John's ear. The end had come. I shivered. My whole body was cold, sweat pouring out despite the night wind cutting my skin. I slowly turned my head. He stood there, twice as tall as a normal person. His eyes were red as fire. His skin was burnt black and rough. He smiled crookedly, his broken teeth showing dark gaps. I wanted to run away, but my legs were stiff, unable to move. The phone in my hand vibrated violently. A weak female voice rang out one last time, "John, this is the last chance. Choose." I shouted, what should I choose? But the only response I got was a sob. The hoarse voice cut through, clearly choosing to live with me, or die to free me. Those creepy words echoed throughout the land, mixed with the howling wind, causing my entire body to freeze. He held out his charred hand, his palm open as if inviting. From there, distorted images poured out, souls that had been imprisoned in the game, screaming in silence. I saw the long-haired girl herself, her eyes empty, her voice echoing as if from the abyss. "You must destroy him. Don't let him take you." My tears welled up, my mind seemed to shatter. I raised my head and shouted, "Why me?" The hoarse voice replied, "Because you heard the first call, you are the last link." The phone lit up. The screen flashed violently with the words, "Sacrifice yourself to end it all." I clutched it in my hand, my heart pounding. I knew that if I did, I might disappear forever, but at least it would be over. The giant shadow approached, the darkness engulfing the entire lot. I screamed, gathering all my strength to throw the phone to the ground. It exploded, a blinding white light bursting out, blowing away the black smoke and his roar. The charred ghosts gradually disappeared. The screams weakened and then stopped. The space around me shook violently, as if the whole world was collapsing. Collapsed, my whole body aching. When I opened my eyes, I saw that the lot was quiet again. The charred bus had disappeared, leaving only ashes fluttering in the wind. I sat there in a daze, thinking that I had finally escaped. But then, in the silence, a familiar sound rang out from my pocket. A phone rang, shrill and persistent. I shakily pulled it out, looking at the screen. Not the old, broken phone, but the phone I used every day. The familiar, terrifying number displayed on the screen. I froze, my heart stopped for a beat. The ringing sound echoed through the deserted land. As if it would never stop, I wanted to throw it away, but my hands couldn't relax. A whisper came. From John's speaker, the game never ended. I screamed, throwing the phone hard on the ground, but it didn't break. The screen lit up with a new message welcoming you to the next round. I collapsed, my throat choked, my eyes blurred with despair. The wind whistled through the trees, carrying a hoarse laugh that spread far and wide. I realized that this game had no end, and I had just stepped through one of many doors, and of part 11. Please follow the next episode to see what else John will have to face in the terrifying loop of the cursed phone number game.